down to the last out for the Yankees. Dent, the tying run at second. Tiebreaker blares at first. Reggie Jackson is the batter.
You couldn't ask for a more dramatic moment for a young pitcher to walk into right here.
Strike one.
Wow!
At age 21, pitcher Bob Welch was on his way to becoming an American baseball hero. You have just seen the Los Angeles Dodgers star throw to the almost legendary Reggie Jackson. A confrontation that, in the words of the announcer, was a baseball drama at its best. The World Series, 2 out, 2 men on base, the tying and winning runs. One of the game's premier hitters against a young, relatively untried Bob Welch. I'm Glenn Jorgensen of River Park, and this is It's Great to Be Alive. Our guest is Bob Welch, who not only faced the Reggie Jacksons of baseball, but also battled one of life's most serious problems, alcoholism. Bob Welch, a young, strong, a gifted athlete, a major league pitcher in a World Series, and an alcoholic. Stay with us and hear his story and see 8 more moments of baseball history. They'll be coming up all through this. It's great to be alive. Bob, you went from being a World Series hero to where you were kind of on the verge of, I guess you could almost say, obscurity, and then you came back to be selected as an all-star. Now that's got to be an interesting story of how you can make that kind of a ride. What happened that took you from being a hero to where you were fading out of your career?
I'll tell you, it wasn't so much as part of fading out of my career that scared me, it was fading out of my life. You know, it really is what the part that scared me the most. You know, one of the reasons was a result of being a pretty heavy drinker. In 1978, it was my first year with the Dodgers on the professional or in the major leagues. And I did have a chance to pitch in a World Series, and some good things come out of the series, even though we did lose. The following year, I was throwing the baseball quite well. I was 4-1 as a starter, and then our ball club wasn't doing very well overall. And I had a conversation with our manager and decided the best thing for our team was go down to the bullpen. I went down to the bullpen and threw very well for about a month, but then I had some problems with my elbow. And I sat out for about 3 months and did one thing. I was in these towns. I started drinking quite heavily and sort of drowning my sorrows and my fears and everything that was, you know, surrounding my career, and just spending some time in the bars, and things just started going downhill from there.
21 years old. Bob Welch. 1 ball, 1 strike. They've been sending that low bridge all night to Reggie Jackson.
So really, that sort of was at the end before your new life began.
Right. Well, I was confronted by the Dodger management a few times throughout the course of the season there. They had seen some things and recognized some things that I was doing. I was giving some signs up, showing up to the ballpark, you know, intoxicated, or staying out late at night, or, you know, doing some things that were just showing up some signs off the field. And they had talked to me about it a few times, and I didn't pay no attention to them. You know, I got defensive and sort of ran and hid, and you know, just tried to avoid them in any situation that I was intoxicated. So I went home that winter and really tried to quit drinking myself. I said, okay, you know, if these people think I have a problem with drinking, I'll show them I'll quit drinking myself, and it didn't work.
When did you first start drinking in your life, period?
Well, I think, you know, I may have had a sip of beer along the way, you know, maybe age 9, or, you know, just maybe taking a sip.
Kind of an experimental, like the big folks were doing it type thing?
And then I finally sat down and said, hey, okay, my friends were going to a football game. This is when I was a sophomore in high school, age 15. And they were going out to the football game, and they had been drunk, or they tried it and experimented a couple weeks before. And these are my good friends that I've been associated with, you know, from age 5 all the way up to age 15 now for the past 10 years. And I felt, well, you know, these are my friends, you know, a little peer pressure, and I was kind of excited or kind of wondering what the feeling was all about. And we went to the store and we bought it ourselves at age 15.
You just walked into it?
Walked into the store, bought it ourselves. We knew that this individual would sell it to the younger people, and I bought a bottle of wine and went out and drank it. And from that day, you know, I liked the feeling and the effect that I got from alcohol.
Okay, I think that's important. At that point, even now, as you look back, you recognize that it was more what it did for you than the taste of it.
Oh, definitely.
1 ball, 1 strike, 2 outs. Time run at second. Bucky Dent, Paul Blair's at first.
And you know the guy at the plate, a guy who just has a knack for knowing the greatness of a moment, Reggie Jackson.
Fouls it back with fastball. It's 1 ball, 2 strikes, 2 outs.
How about what else? What other reasons do you now recognize it? Perhaps. How about the junior-senior prom type thing where the girls?
Very shy with women, you know, especially after the first time I was drunk. I went to the ball game and you know, I was able to talk to girls, you know, as compared to the past where I was scared to death with them. You know, that was a lot easier. And not only that, I was able to sit down and tell somebody if I was mad at them or I felt a little bit stronger. You know, I felt better looking. You know, all these things that were associated with drinking.
So you felt like you could dance like Fred Astaire and look like Clark Gable.
There you go.
and you were a hit, and you enjoyed that. So peer pressure to take care of some feelings of perhaps inadequacy and inferiority,
not being able to fit with the fellows,
or if to cover or to cover up some pain, well, pain of living, I suppose would be fair to say, wouldn't it, Bob?
Yeah, I would think so, but I really can't see at that time.
Sure.
You know, the very first times that I sat down and started drinking, maybe later on down the line, if I had a bad basketball game or if I played bad or pitched poorly, or if I had a bad test, or if I was worried about what was going to happen on my exam the next day, I would go out and maybe have a few drinks or something like that. So I think as further I got into drinking, I started to associate drinking with you know, covering up some fears and maybe within my home life or maybe with school or with playing athletics.
Handling the problems of living, more or less.
I would say so.
Study and determination. Bob Welch, a deep breath. Maybe a half prayer, and his best pitch. Fouled it back. What a battle.
Something drastic has happened in my life has been associated with drink.
Doesn't that kind of reinforce, well, we use a very simple definition of alcoholism, and you know there's like 156 definitions, but the one that I like is simply that alcoholism is trouble. If there's trouble in some area of your life, continuing and growing trouble, then that's alcoholism.
Yeah, that sounds, you know, you go round and round and round wondering if I am an alcoholic, or, you know, sometimes you sit down and think, well, maybe I am that one that can go out and have a drink or whatever. But, you know, when I sit down and look and see the times that I've been in trouble, like you say, they have been alcohol related. You know,
going back even to your high school days.
Even back to my high school days. I got in trouble with the basketball team. I showed up to the high school game intoxicated. You know, in basketball,
what did the coach think of that? Or the fans, for that matter? Or were you able to fake it out?
We won the ball game.
That makes all the difference.
At that time, all the players knew I was drunk, and I was out, and I was funny when I got drunk. So they thought it was funny, especially after we won the ball game. I told the coach I had the flu. I really don't think he believed me. And now since I've gone back and talked to him, you know, he knows that I was drunk, but he didn't know what to do.
1 ball, 2 strikes, 2 outs. Tying run at second. 4-3. Dodgers, 9th inning. How to play.
Did you ever have a classmate say anything to you in those days, like, hey, Bob, you know, what are you doing? Did anybody ever speak to you in high school days?
No, not a soul spoke to me in high school days. The majority of people that I associated with were right there with me. You know, I didn't go out with somebody who's going to sit down there and have milk and cheese and crackers at lunch. I went out with somebody who's going to drink beer with me.
Sure.
You know, and that's the same the way things progressed throughout my life. I was going to be associated with somebody who's going to sit down and total tea when I wanted to get drunk and have him preach to me about drinking. So I associated with people who were, you know, enjoying alcohol or abusing alcohol the same way I was from day one.
Bob, you went on to college, as I believe, and then what was the team you were with before they called you up to the Dodgers?
I went to Albuquerque, New Mexico. But in '77, I was drafted by the Dodgers, and I went to Eastern Michigan University.
Now, you were there. Were you their first draft choice one year?
Yeah, I was their first draft choice in June of 1977.
That's kind of an honor and a kind of a
Yeah, it was.
a
And
trip.
it was a very difficult time back then, and I was getting drunk quite a lot back then, because that was my year that I would be eligible to be drafted. And I had hurt my elbow. It was the first elbow experience I had, and I set out and did not pitch my whole junior year. And I had visions of, you know, something that I always wanted to do was to play professional baseball once I started college. And it seemed that that was going to be delayed, or maybe, you know, never have an opportunity to be a professional athlete. And I was fortunate enough that the Dodgers, you know, had seen me, and I was starting to make progress, starting to throw again after the baseball season was over, our college season, and they went out of their way and they selected me, you know, and thank the good Lord that the Dodgers selected me, or else, you know, I may not be sitting here talking to you.
Yeah, that's okay. And you got called up, and you were already really, looking back, and I realized at the time you wouldn't see it, but looking back now, would you say that you were pretty well along in progression of alcoholism at the point where you came up?
Right into full steam right there, especially in the college days. In high school, I was with my family. You had to worry about coming home sometimes too late, maybe sneaking in the back door, or maybe hiding or having some breath mints or something. But you go away to college, you don't have to worry about that. They have parties, you know, 2, 3, 4 times a week where you can spend $1 or $2 and drink all the beer you want, and not worrying about coming home, having mother or father there saying, hey, you know, where you been all night? You know, that's where it started to really catch fire and build from there, you know, my college days.
Might I just say, in there, when you're talking about those high school days, would you advocate that parents, and I don't mean, you know, bug, but they probably ought to have some real interest and be kind of aware, of course, of what their young people are doing?
Well, I think they need to sit down and talk. You know, I don't think, I know our family didn't discuss or talk that much about, you know, the abuse. You know, I know my father would sit me down and say, hey, son, you know, I think, you know, you better watch yourself drinking or take care of yourself. But he never really said, you know, I see these things in you, becoming a very serious problem drinker, a potential alcoholic, because he didn't know.
Yeah, the awareness of what could happen and what it was very limited back in those days.
I think families need to sit down and talk, you know, and let their children know that okay, these are some things that you may experiment with. I know that my mother and father, you know, never really said, you know, we don't want you to drink. But I think you need to sit down and tell your children that, hey, there's some very serious problems that can come about if you do select to drink and if you do choose to drink. You know, I have nothing against people who drink, but I would much rather go out and help somebody who's abusing alcohol and help myself stay sober. I think the families need to sit down and talk and discuss not only about alcohol, but about you know, other chemicals.
Their relationships.
Just sit down and talk and
communications.
And talk openly and communicate. You know, make everybody know each other a little bit better and learn from each other.
Look at that study. Ball. 2 balls, 2 strikes, 2 outs.
What about in the stadium itself or around the games?
A lot of things associated with my attitude towards, you know, training, or the way I show up to a ballpark sometimes.
You ever come to a ball game in the majors intoxicated?
Oh yeah, I come to the ballpark one time in San Francisco at the end of the season of 1979. You know, totally smashed, embarrassing myself, getting on a team bus, you know, cussing at whoever was in the way, cussing at my manager, you know, having confrontations with teammates, starting fights with other guys on other team, just totally embarrassing myself, you know. And at the time, I really didn't care, you know, I didn't pay any attention to it. I was too drunk. Throwing some ashtrays off the top of floors, you know, 60 floors up in San Francisco, you know, firing them at somebody and things like that. Just doing a lot of crazy things along the way, and not taking care of myself. I think, you know, self-destruction along the way.
It's been said that alcoholism is a form, well, obviously it's a form of suicide. If we keep on going, it will self-destruct.
Yeah, especially now when you get involved with the youth and some of the people in the facilities, and you take a look at the way people appear after 40 and 50 years of drinking. You know, you just see that it just slowly
really deteriorates.
Just slowly deteriorates the face and the body, and you know, you can just take a peek at somebody and say, you know, I bet 90% of this gentleman here has an alcohol problem.
Yeah.
Foul back. Jackson continues to battle Welch. Welch continues to battle Jackson.
It was about January after the holidays and everything. And
They called you at your home and
back in Michigan and said, you know, would you come out here to California and talk to an individual with us? They didn't mention anything about my alcohol or about my drinking or anything. Just said, we want you to come out and talk and discuss a few things. And I checked into the Biltmore Motel over there, and they sent this gentleman over there in the afternoon, and we sat and talked for about 4 or 5 hours. And he was an alcoholic himself, and he is an alcoholic, and he just really showed a lot of things that people had told him along the way, and teammates of mine had confronted me and said, hey, you know, these are some things we can see in you. And he talked to my mother and my father, and they told him some things, and members within the Dodger organization and people who I've associated with, and told me all these things that these people had recognized in me, and just really just said, hey, you know, take a look at it. It's right there. You know, you can tell me to go jump in a lake, or you can tell me whatever you want, but I care for you. And these are some things you can do.
so you had kind of an intervention.
Kind of an intervention type thing.
Which I think is important to make the point too, Bob, that so often people who care about us, they don't know what to do, and so they don't do anything. And that and that's not really the best way of caring. The caring is to somehow, through getting together people who care, or somehow getting the information to say, Bob, this is what's happening, and whether you can see it or not, we want you to know that.
Right.
And if, in effect, this is what happened to you then?
Yeah, you know, he sat down there and talked to me, and I was ready. You know, I was ripe. I was ready to go. I don't think I would have done it by myself. I needed somebody to just sort of say, hey, you know, boom, that's the way to go. You know, okay, I'm gone. And he suggested, hey, a treatment center, you know, such as the one up at River Park, but it was called the Meadows in Arizona. And I went there that following Thursday, and I was in LA on Monday, and that Thursday was the earliest I could get in. So I checked in there, and boom.
And you were on your way back.
I was on my
First,
way
though, you know, I think we all have to have that moment of truth where somehow or other we reach the point of really being determined to give it a good try. And I recall that a shower played a role in your...
oh, yeah. You know, I got there and I was, you know, my perception of an alcoholic was the individual who's laying over behind the tree, you know, in the public park. That's what I thought an alcoholic was, not an individual 23 years old who's playing baseball for the major leagues, has a, you know, money in his pocket, and has a nice girlfriend, has a beautiful family and all this. You know, that's not me. I'm not an alcoholic. And I get over there, you know, and you see the look on some people's faces, you know, and that's not me.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just felt about as alone as I possibly could. I had no teammates there, had nobody helping me, you know, nobody out in the field. You know, it was sort of my own ball game. And I had to battle it all myself. And I just felt about as low as you possibly could go. And I went into the shower, you know, and I just remember staying in there and just, you know, like everything in the world just sort of hit me at the time that, wham, you know, I can't stay in here. You know, I just sat in that
What
shower
am I doing
and
here?
cried and cried and cried for, you know, an hour or 2 hours, and just sort of released a few things, and, you know, thought about, you know, what can I do? You know, I'd like to be home with Mary Ellen, I'd like to see my father, I'd like to be home with my brother, or doing all types of things, and I didn't want to be there, is what it was, you know, and I probably would, if I would have had a car, you know, I probably would have left, to tell you the truth. But I came out of the shower, you know, and I started to sit down and talk to some people and meet some individuals who were much older than myself, and as well as people who were young men, you know, who were 14 and 15 years old. And I said, okay, you know, I must be in the right spot. And after you get over there and get involved with the treatment center. But when I was in that shower, you know, it was just about...
So that would sound like the beginning of surrender to the fact that you have the affliction, which is the beginning of freedom.
Right.
When you give up, you begin to win. And I sense that was your moment of beginning that process.
Yeah, that was a big one. But you know, it took a good solid week over there, to maybe 10 days, just sitting down and talking and listening, and just trying to give some communication back to other people about, you know, why am I here? I mean, did you drink this way? You know, when you sit down and see the things that people who've been over there for drinking for 40 years, you know, and they show me and tell me some signs about the way they drank when they were young, you know, I can see myself right there.
In the life of most alcoholics, those who are fortunate, there are people who care. These are the family members, the friends, even employers who care enough to intervene, to come forward to tell the alcoholic, you can't go on this way. You cannot continue to drink. I will not accept you this way when there is help. You must find help, and I will help you find it. In the past, this has been left mostly to family members, those close to the victim. But more and more businesses, employers, even organizations such as the Major League Baseball and football teams have determined that they too must intervene. The Los Angeles Dodgers have $1 million pitcher in young Bob Welch. It was an investment they wanted to protect. And when they saw this young man destroying his bright future with alcohol, they did something about it. Today's businesses are also recognizing that they cannot afford to lose their bright and talented people to alcoholism. Employee assistance programs, such as those structured by River Park, are helping save many employees because they are valuable in many ways. Bob, the family aspect of alcoholism, we believe that it's impossible for people to live in this situation without they themselves experiencing some very negative effects from it in their own lives. Would you agree with that in your situation?
Well, I'd say very much so. I know that my I caused a lot of pain with my mother, with my father, with my sister, and as well as my brother along the way. And they weren't doing the drinking. I was. Yeah. I know from worry and from fear from my mother and father and my sister's standpoint, and from some things that my brother had to do along the ways from the Dodger offices, calling him, trying to get in touch with me to do certain things. So it wasn't just affecting myself, it was affecting my family a lot more than it was affecting myself at the time. You know, just there's a lot of fear and worry. And when you see my mother come over to the treatment center and sit down, and, you know, and in tears saying, you know, the pain that I had caused her along the way, you know, it's a bad feeling. It's a sad feeling that, you know, my God, you know, can I be doing, why did I go out and drink, or why would I do this along the way?
Bob, what's it like now that you're on the road to recovery?
Well, I tell you, it feels good. You know, even I woke up this morning, it was a little cold or whatever. You know, feeling kind of bad and excited about going to spring training and all the types of things. A lot of anxieties, and you know, even now when I wake up on a bad day, you know, it compares nothing to the time that when I woke up when I had a jug full of, you know, whiskey in my belly or something like that, fighting it off. And my attitude has changed, you know, towards myself, you know, being much more honest with myself. The way I treat my family, you know, I mean, it took me 23 years to really sit down and tell my mother and my father and my family and my brother and them that I love you. Yeah. You know, and until I was sober.
Hard for people to do that.
Until I was sober, you know, I didn't take the time out to tell them that. And, you know, I'm not with my family that much now, and, you know, I miss them. Just my whole attitude towards, you know, what I want to do with myself. You know, how do I feel about myself today? Not next week, you know, or not 2 months from now. You know, go out and make today the best day possible and enjoy it, and know that some of the things I'm going to experience
Great
today
philosophy, isn't it, to live the one day at a time?
It sure is, you know, and never in my life until I was associated with this alcoholism, I had no idea of going on the way of that.
Yeah.
Tell you, this kid, he doesn't have any shorts when it comes to that thing called guts. He proved it in San Francisco and here tonight. He's just looking in, getting his sign, and firing. Listen to the crowd. High, ball 3, we're down to a full count.
How about within the organization, your fellow players, management, and so on? Have they accepted your alcoholism?
Oh yeah, very much so. Dusty Baker and Davey Lopes were a big part of what had happened to myself along the way. I remember they had periodically throughout the season say, "Hey, Welch, you know, I mean, just sort of nonchalantly, you know, I mean, take a look at yourself, you know, I mean, you better set your priorities straight. You know, I mean, we want you and like you know, I mean, you better get your act together. You know, we want you to help our ball club." And a couple times throughout the course of the season, they could see those things in me. So now and then, in times, you know, you get a little joking in the clubhouse and this and that. You know, Welch, why don't you go out and have a beer, this and that. But they're behind me, and I know that they're happy for me because they've seen some things that I've done along the way when I was drinking.
Bob, you, and we're not talking about AA per se, but the philosophy of AA, which I know is a part of your life. And a big part of that is this matter of doing what you're doing this morning, of giving away what you've been given. And you're doing a great deal of that. You have, I know you've written a book about your experience, sharing your story. And I'm sure that will have a positive impact on someone, just as these programs will tell someone out there that there is a better way and that you can recover. And as I hear you today, you're high now, but you're high on life.
Yeah, I'm sitting there having a good old time. I get excited when I start talking about it, to tell you the truth, because I feel pretty good inside, and I'm not drunk, you know.
Yeah.
And the majority of the time in my life, I sit down and talk and carry on a conversation with somebody, I was drunk. Now I feel good. You know, I woke up this morning and had a little glass of grapefruit juice and come over here to visit with you and had a good time. But you know, I need some help myself. I need to build a support system myself. I need reinforcement from the outside. Because I can't do it all by myself. I need some help, and this book has given me a pretty large support system where I made a commitment to a lot of people. And then at the same time I get reinforcement through letters from them, and as well I've received some negative letters, but that's part of it.
Sure,
and now if I do go out and decide that, you know, when I start thinking about, you know, maybe I can have that one beer, that if I do go out and get drunk, I'm going to take a lot of people down with me. And it feels good knowing that a lot of people out there care.
And then they're cheering you on, not only for your powers on the field, but you're in your battle with life. And I'm excited because you're helping us tell the story of what this series or program is called, that it's great to be alive.
And it sure is great to be alive, I'll tell you.
And we thank you very much and wish for you an outstanding season, or whatever the season, continued inner contentment in your own life.
Thank you.
And the good that you're doing for other people will continue to do, Bob.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
Percentage to go to 3-2, and it swings to the Yankees, and Jackson makes the kid wait. Dent at second. Blair at first. 2 outs. There they go. Struck him out. Ball game is over. Bob Welch, a tremendous pitching performance. Listen to the crowd.
Acceptance and support. Not only did Bob Welch's teammates accept his alcoholism, they offered their support. As Bob told us of this acceptance and support, he seemed a little in awe of it. As he told us of his commitment to many in his book, 5 O'Clock Comes Early, he again mentioned the support that many offered. Again, there was an element of surprise that it would be this way. So many young alcoholics do recognize that alcohol is the problem in their lives, but they refuse to admit it, even to their friends, especially to their friends. They fear those friends will think them less than a man, less than a lady. And as I've seen so many times, hundreds upon hundreds of times, those friends, those who really care, are the first to accept and the strongest to support. Alcoholism amongst young people is a growing menace to our society, and the answer is both easy and terribly difficult. It is simply saying, I will not accept you this way. You must find help, and I will help you find it. That help is at River Park, and we'll help you help them. River Park is help and hope for the alcoholic.